panel.
Thank you, Emma Jane. It's our pleasure to be here 11 hours in the future from many of you who are in the UK, but many of you will also know that I've spent a long time in the UK with many UK institutions, so it is a lovely welcome back to 11 hours in the past. My name is Peter Bryant. I am the Associate Dean of Education at the University of Sydney Business School, and along with my 4 colleagues, we've stayed up late to talk to you about how we have engaged in what has been an incredibly complex circumstance for every university around the world. Australia particularly was slightly ahead of the crowd in the fact that we were very early in our semester when the COVID lockdown started hitting. We'd already, particularly at a university like the University of Sydney, which is one of Australia's leading research intensive institutions, very large institution, 78,000 students across 4 faculties and 3 university schools. We'd already started adjusting to some particularly critical pivots in learning because a lot of our students in the business school, around 50% of our students come from overseas and primarily China. And at that point, the Australian government had shut down the borders to China long before COVID had spread around the world as a pandemic. So we've been going at this now since mid-January. It feels very strange for us to sort of be reflecting on almost a year's worth of work. I'll get you, Wing, possible. You could share your screen so we can see the slides. If not, we will just wing it, as the case might be. Excellent, thank you, Wing. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to give a brief introduction to the sort of connected story of the 4 presentations that we're going to give. Each of my colleagues, Jessica, Wing, Andrew, and Carlos, will present some of the project work that they've been involved with our faculty. We do represent the business school at the University of Sydney. We are the largest faculty in the university. We have 17,500 students. We have the largest master's program in the Southern Hemisphere, our Master of Commerce, which has 8,500 students in a single qualification. And we have some incredibly large programs with very high proportions of international students. So we're going to talk a little bit about the projects where we've done working with our academics and some of the things that we've tried to take away from this year and not just cope, not just do emergency response, not just manage the circumstance, but actually turn this into a learning opportunity for us as an institution. Next slide, Wing. So as far as we can see, COVID has really fractured the futures of many institutions. We talk a little bit about this actually being a Kodak moment for institutions in that the models of education that we had relied on, become very familiar with, are not necessarily ones that we are going to be able to take forward. Although fascinatingly, there is quite a strong particularly in Australia, where we are at a different stage of the way we're managing the pandemic, I know, to colleagues in other countries. We are feeling the intense pressure to snap back to the way we were in 2019. Next slide, Wing. So, how has 2020 fractured the future of higher education? This is a critical question that we've all had to pose for ourselves, both in the emergency rapid response that we've done, but also the much more considered approach we've taken at the business school. So we went and asked people about this. We went and asked our staff colleagues. Next slide, Wing. So I'm waiting. There we go. Thank you. We asked what our staff told us about what 2020 meant for them and what 2020 did for them. What they told us was about the spaces, the faces, the location, and the identity that they were dealing with. The things that they really struggled and missed were things like how they communicated with their students, and how they sort through that process, how they supported the students to communicate with each other, that interactivity between students and in different groups, and particularly where you've got some students on campus and some students face-to-face, which is what we've had this semester. What technology the students and the staff were willing to experiment with and what they weren't. It was really easy to convince them to just use Zoom and to use the LMS or the VLE. It was much harder to start to get them to think about different platforms and techniques that they could use to actually do something different rather than simply replicate existing behaviours. How they changed their assessment and feedback, how they created a learning experience, and how challenging, rewarding, wrong, exhilarating, normal, and different all of this felt for them. We also asked our staff. Next slide, Wing. So, asked our students, sorry. So what did our students tell us? They talked a lot about their safety and how they felt in terms of learning in their house, learning in their dorm, learning where you've got your dad walking in the back of the Zoom screen while you're trying to do a presentation nude. They told us a lot about the fact that the university represented a safe space, but their own environments were not necessarily safe. They did talk about the isolation they felt and how lonely this felt, even just not walking around other people. And this is particularly the case with Chinese international students, and we've got a lot of them who are completely spread across a country of just the sheer magnitude of population and geographic size, the uncertainty they felt, and then the sense of coping that they had to do. And I just want to tell the story, next slide, Wing, of one very small video that a student made for us. I won't show the video. We asked the students to tell us about their spaces where they were studying. And this gentleman on the right in the black t-shirt submitted this video where he was losing motivation, and he did this very, very sad shot of him playing on a table tennis table by himself when the table tennis ball, he served the table tennis ball and it just dripped off the end of the table. Him eating noodles by himself and them falling on the ground and just feeling really depressed. And eventually, what he needed was the contact of his dorm mate, who just stood socially distanced away at the door and told him to get it together, bro. And it lifted his spirit. So that sense of community, purpose, that sense of interaction was something that our students felt they lost. Next slide, Wing. So with that in mind, I want to hand over now to my four colleagues. I'm going to start with Andrew Cram, who is an educational developer at the business school, and he's going to talk about some work we did with a significant number of our units at the business school to really adapt them to this new environment. Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Wing, if you can keep that going, excellent.
Sure. One moment.
I'll just let you know when the slides go.
Yeah, one moment.
When to change.
1 second.
That's fine. So this is a curriculum enhancement project that was run in the last semester, so August to December. It follows a co-design approach. Yeah, that's good. Excellent. Follows a co-design approach between the academics, the faculty, and members of the business co-design team. And the objective was to help the unit coordinators to make mostly incremental improvements that were in line with the learning and teaching objectives of the business school, but in a sustainable way. So it's a short-term injection of additional expertise and focus on the units, and the units were selected by the discipline heads. So it's also about making sure that the unit coordinators were really comfortable with teaching online, and just to nudge them that extra bit further. So most of the units had already gone online in the previous semester, but it was the first time online for some of them. And just a bit of to talk about why it's called Light Touch. It's part of a bigger project called Connected Learning at Scale. And there were sort of two types of units or of co-design going on. There was Light Touch and Deep Touch. So the Deep Touch involved fewer units, but with more people involved. So there were a lot more resources for that. With the Light Touch, there was a lot more emphasis on the unit coordinators taking charge and extending themselves. And then just to mention that the core focus for this semester was improving information engagement, which is how the students engage with the core discipline content and skills that they need to learn in the unit. But then there's other facets for the future as well. Next slide, thanks. So I'll just take you on a very quick journey through the project. And then the next slide. To 11 or 12 units, give or take. And then it's up to the unit coordinators to decide how much and how to engage. If you can just go back a slide, Wing, there should be another one that just goes through. That's the one. So it was co-designed, but it was not mandatory. So it was all optional on behalf of the unit coordinators, what they did, how they engaged, what they engaged with. And I should stress that, again, that the bulk of the effort in this project was done by the unit coordinators. They're the real stars of the show. In terms of the support, much of it was through the interactions between the unit coordinators and the educational developers. But the expertise of many others was completely critical, including the media production and learning design teams in the business co-design team. But also the unit coordinators had different ways of running their units, and so the lead tutor the broader academic community, really important, of course, and there's a MS Teams learning and teaching community that was sort of central to that within the business school. Next slide, Wing. So I'll just take you through some specific examples of what the support looked like as part of the co-design process. The bottom list is things that were put in place that all of the unit coordinators could access if they chose. And so these were there to provide a baseline level of support and encourage alignment with the learning and teaching plans of the business school. But perhaps more importantly, and what I would argue added the colour to the process, are the things in the top list. So these were things, bespoke support orchestrated by the educational developers in response to the specific needs of each unit coordinator. So that each unit coordinator got very different sorts of supports from the top list. Next slide, thanks. This is the last one for me. Just to quickly cover what was actually implemented in the units through this project. There were a couple of key desired outcomes. Like I said, the focus was on improving information engagement of students with the unit. And the most intensive development here is the chunked and interactive content. Essentially, it refers to shifting from the lecture style approach to more chunked content that students can easily engage with online in a self-directed manner. There's also a lot more variation than this slide shows in the ways that the unit coordinators increased interactivity in their units. Quizzes, polls, collaborative tools in breakout rooms and that sort of thing. But basically, the main takeaway from this slide is that if you are considering this sort of model, where strong support is provided around specific developments that aren't mandatory, that the unit coordinators are by and large really positive and quite engaged. And you might expect maybe around 3/4 of the unit coordinators to engage in each of the developments. So thanks for that. I'm looking forward to chatting after the lightning talks into any questions you might have.
Thank you for that, Andrew. I think the next presenter is actually Wing himself. So I think Wing gets to control his own slides and his own presenting. Well done, Wing.
Give me one sec. Okay. Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Wing. I'm one of the media team members in the business co-design team. So the thing I want to talk about today is our DIY studio, which is one of the measures we tackle the COVID during the COVID lockdown period. First of all, I would like to play a video.
Bear with us. We shall get the audio going.
When you share your screen or an application, there's an option that you need to check that says share audio.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. So if you stop and then go to restart, you should be able to check that option of share audio.
Okay.
Just while Wing does that, I'll just give a bit of a background to what Wing. Oh, you got it, Wing? Okay, cool.
Sorry. Give me a sec. Let me stop the video.
Okay. So just while Wing's doing that, to give some background, one of the critical things that we obviously had to do, which everyone's had to do, is look at the way in which we've had to reuse media in a much more engaged way. As Andrew pointed out, we did spend a lot of time moving towards chunked video and breaking down that kind of didactic block of content. But what we also really wanted to do is lift the capacity of people to make media in very different ways. We were aware that a lot of this was either direct lecture recording style, which is to a non-eye-lined audience that you're recording. It might just be voice and slides, but we wanted people to actually utilize the technology in a way that made the technology important to improve the kind of teaching we were doing. Rather than simply a replication of existing practices. So the DIY studio that Wing's going to show you a little bit of was one of our very important pieces of work to customize, to make as easy as possible for people to actually do something different with their media. How you going, Wing?
Yeah, maybe I just add some information to Peter's introduction. So I think Peter is right to point out that during this COVID, many academics are actually looking for some sort of like solutions to create some good quality videos. So the quality, the video content, including introduction of key concepts, welcome to the course, weekly updates, screen capture of PowerPoint slides with annotation, animation, and webinars. So we are thinking about, we use the DIY Studio to provide them with good audio quality and video quality materials. So there may be two solutions. One solution is they can work from home, which is actually we are doing. We have a solution of providing them good webcam and good mics for staff to borrow, and also we provide DIY kits. But at the end, we think, well, if we have some sort of good quality equipment and material, why don't we make use of the DIY Studio? So that's why we transform our original small DIY studio to provide them with a tablet so that they can annotate the material. We have a teleprompter so that they can actually look and express or tell the stories of what they want to say. And then we have mics and video cameras, and also we also have a TV backdrop, which provide them with very fascinating backdrops with just one button. But during this period, of course, we have many challenges. The challenges including the lightings, whether there's sufficient lighting to produce good audios and videos, and also the booking system, because once they think the DIY Studio is a good source of producing videos, how do they actually book the room? So we have to think about a booking system. And also we have to think about the well-beings. We come across a case when, because in the normal posture, they should be sitting to film themselves. But there is a case when a lecturer thinks sitting is actually not healthy for him. So we think about whether we provide some standing opportunity or standing solution for them. And at the end, we also have to think about how to give some instructions to new users and how to assist the staff in producing this video. So we think about remote access. So one of us will be off-site, and we use some sort of software solution. We remotely guide them through the recording. And also we have to think about the feedback. How do we know this solution is good for them? I think this is what I want to talk about.
Thank you, Wing. I'll now hand over to my colleague Jessica, who ran what we've called an intracurricular program. So obviously you've got curricular work inside units. We've got what people would refer to traditionally as extracurricular work, which would be whether that's the activities of clubs and societies, whether that's career development, whether that's employability. What we have spent a lot of time this year working on in a number of programs, the one Jessica is involved with, Future Makers, the one that I led called Leading in a Post-COVID World, one that's just won the QS Wharton Stars Overall Gold Education Award for any of you that had entered into that, our program called Job Smart Edge. What we wanted students to be able to do is find ways to apply the knowledge that they were learning in their units to something that wasn't directly connected to that unit. And Future Makers, which is the project that Jessica is going to talk about, was very much that kind of intracurricular application. So I'll hand over to Jess.
Thanks, Peter, and hi everyone. Thanks so much for having us. It's a pleasure to be here today to talk to you. And I just asked Wing if you wouldn't mind kindly sharing the slides as well, just so we can do a bit of a show and tell. But as Peter said, I'll be talking to you today. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So I'll just be briefly talking to you today about an initiative we ran in the business school in the second half of this year called Future Makers that I had the privilege to work on along with a small, fabulous team. So I'll start just by quickly outlining the aims of the project, which Peter's already touched on, and then quickly talk a little bit just about how it worked and what some of the outcomes were, but keep it very brief as well. So in our school's strategy, we actually talk about equipping our students and building their capacity to address critical global and local challenges of the future. And obviously this year in 2020 has really brought that into relief, how important it is for university graduates to have those problem-solving skills and leadership skills for the future. So we didn't want, we wanted to actually ask students, what do you think the critical global and local challenges, the big issues of the future are, as we design their education that's meant to help equip them to address those challenges. So this crowdsourcing project was really about that, crowdsourcing student perspectives on what are they excited about but also concerned and worried about with the future, and how do they think their education should be equipping them with the skills and capacities they need to address those challenges as future leaders. So we didn't just want it to be extracting the students' ideas, though. We actually wanted to provide them a rich learning experience. As Peter said, it wasn't actually in a unit of study, so it sits alongside intra or co-curricular learning, peer learning experience that really foregrounds these kind of critical thinking and problem-solving collaboration skills. And you can just see on the left there, I've got a screenshot of the online platform through which we held the crowdsourcing challenge. And that was also thinking about student experience in this really kind of volatile, uncertain time, to try to create an online community, a space where students could come together and connect outside of their units of study and across whether they're undergrad or postgrad or whatever discipline they're in, a space where they can connect. So I'll ask you to move to the next slide, please, Wing. So I'll super quickly talk about the scope and scale. So we ran it as a 9-week crowdsourcing challenge. We invited all of the students studying in the business school to join, and we saw over 1,300 students join the Future Makers community. It ran in 2 rounds with 10 challenges. 36 ideas were submitted, 151 votes cast on each other's ideas, and 126 comments made on each other's ideas, plus thousands of page views within the platform. Next slide, please. So quickly to talk through how it worked, we ran it in 2 rounds, and it was meant to be a student-led problem posing and problem solving kind of structure. So in the first round, we asked students, what are the big issues that are impacting on you? Submit your problem, and students can make a contribution, almost like a rich media post where they can put in images and links and a description. And then students can vote on each other's contributions, comment on each other's ideas, help them develop them. And then those top voted issues move to round 2, when we pose those problems back to the community and ask them then to submit ideas or to submit solutions for what the community was telling them their biggest problems were. And then the top solutions would win. And we also had a prize for the user who got the most points, because as you can see, just to talk a little bit about the platform, because obviously this is a technology conference, yeah, the user who got the most points also got a prize, and you can see we had a leaderboard, so there's gamification built into this platform where students would win points for different interactions like commenting, voting, submitting an idea, as well as the gamification that comes through the whole voting structure. And then I'll finally just mention we also got academics from the school to contribute some resources to our blog, where they were offering provocations to the students around global and local challenges that relate to their research. So the next slide will show us what the students actually said. So I've just got some screenshots there, some snapshots of some of the different posts and contributions that students made. So their ideas revealed extraordinary insight into the range of issues that students are facing in a post-COVID world. But some of the themes that emerged were especially around the future of education, green transport options, innovation in manufacturing, how to transform and innovate small and medium enterprises, AI technology, consumption and sustainability, and economic measurement and how we actually measure our economic success. And also another one that came through was organizational culture and how we define that in this working from home context. So I'll just finish up with the last slide, talking about some of the benefits and challenges. And if we have time, we can really maybe go into this more in the discussion. But just to quickly say, the benefits were kind of twofold, we felt, for us and our team in terms of generating content that we can use to help with our educational development, so to help inform the cases and the assessment context that we're designing, but also for us to learn about and research and understand crowdsourcing as a pedagogy. And we felt from these screenshots, I was trying to show a range of different benefits. So on the right there was meant to be the depth of engagement and discussion in the comments of students really learning from each other and really engaged, in-depth discussion. Students really taking care with their profiles and promoting themselves as leaders to their peers. And we've just kind of wrapped the project up and are in the process of evaluating it. But I also screenshotted some of the comments in the feedback survey that we did, that we start to indicate that students did actually learn from being involved in this co-curricular opportunity, saying things like it broadened their perspective or improved their critical thinking skills. So we did also encounter quite a few challenges with this project, and if we have time, I'd love to talk about some of those in the discussion at the end, but I will finish up there, and thank you for your time.
Thanks, Jess. And it's really important, as you might notice through some of these conversations we've been having, we place co-design, co-production right at the very core of what we've been doing to transform the education experience pre-COVID. But when we're in that environment where our students are now fractured across the planet, feeling very isolated, ways in which we can build connection, ways in which we can build interactivity, ways in which we can build networks between our students, ways in which we can involve them in the production, the development, and the ideation processes were super critical for us. And Jess's work on Future Makers was a really key part of that. The final presentation we're going to do before we have a bit of time for discussion, and obviously we're answering a lot of questions in the chat, so keep that discussion going, is from my colleague Carlos Prieto Alvarez. Now he's going to talk about some of the work that we've done in terms of using H5P as a tool of embedding interactivity in our video, in our media production. So over to you, Carlos.
Thanks, Peter. The conversation today will be mostly about H5P. Sorry for misspelling that. So H5P is an interactive tool, but also at the same time produces a lot of data on how people are interacting with the content, in this case, mostly in Canvas LMS. So can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. I don't know why the color looks like that. In H5P, maybe some of you are already interacting with this, but it's a tool that allows you to produce multiple interactive objects that you can embed it in different ways. It's an iframe connected to your Canvas LMS or other LMS, and it allows teachers to produce a lot of this content without using code. Something like multiple choices, picture slider, presentation, flashcards, all those subjects without understanding how the code behind this actually works. So it's getting a lot of traction after COVID, since all of the subjects require more engagement activities. And it's actually, a lot of the students actually appreciate having these sort of interactive objects instead of just telling them the information like there. So the way we use in Business School is we embed these interactive activities through our Canvas pages. There are many objects spread around the different units. We mostly do not use H5P for assessment, since H5P is also a new company. they're still improving a lot of the activities, and there's some things actually to get around, like certify the score that you get at the end, but it's still work in progress. And it replaces a lot of tools that we tend to use. Some things, sometimes we use opinion stage, the other tools that sometimes we don't need to do that extensive stuff. So we start to replace this with HIP objects. It's very easy to implement. And this started to get a lot of questions at the end of the semester, which is how are they actually using it? Can you go to the next slide, Queen? So after testing this for almost 2 semesters, we produce a lot of data, and teachers started to ask, but how are they using actually the content? How are they doing it well? What is the score, and what is the medium engagement for these activities? So we start to dig around that we have so many challenges around sharing data that the company is not providing, and this can be the same for many other apps that are new to the market, that they don't have an analytics platform. The first one is the license cost. It's pretty expensive to give a license for each one of the people in there. We can just give them a license every time they want to see the analytics, and they may not need it. We need a backup of all the things that we are doing. HIP can be shared across the different accounts, but we want every unit to, in the end, to have their own content. For these things of safety, we start to get some grades and scores in there that we want to keep limited access. We don't want the analytics to be public, and that's very understandable, but we have to create this mechanism for safety in learning analytics. The data structure, the report that is being produced for HIP, just plain data that exists on the website. There's no option for downloading the data, and we wanted to overpass that and do not rely on the vendor. Also, one challenge that we have in the learning analytics strategy, just in general, is that staff have just limited time and knowledge in analytics. Learning designers and educational developers are the main people that interact with the unit and subject coordinators, but we don't want them to become data scientists to start using analytics. We understand that, and we have to provide the best tools for them to help them deliver some analytics. And we have limited channels to actually deliver the content. We can provide a dashboard or a website just for this. So we have to create more channels. So this is how we started to create a solution to deliver analytics. The next slide. So the process can be actually summarized as follows. We have 4 different stages where we collect the data from the Canvas LMS, but we have raw data, and we want to get to the point of showing the results back to the teacher. So in the middle happens a lot of things. We don't want to rely on the data expert. We don't want people to do thousands of hundreds of reports in doing this. We want everyone to do their own reports and at the same time learn how the data analytics can be produced. We find out a solution that may work for us, which is creating a Power Query script that people can actually use and apply that in Excel. We found other solutions using Power BI and other data analytics applications, but the easiest way for everyone is to understand how to use it in Excel. So we have to create the script to just download and put it in Excel and get the analytics back to you. This was really easy for the learning designers and educational developers because they already have some experience in Excel. They don't have to learn a new tool. What the script actually does is that cleans the data and produces some general charts to help them understand what they can do with this information. Next slide. So this is a preview of how information looks like in HIP. What we call the raw data is the one on the right, which is mostly of the scores that they get, the name of the student, the 10th first score and best score. But this can be a list for 800, and we found lists of 700 students. That is really impossible to do this manually, and the teacher doesn't have the time to do this. So we provide a script that looks kind of like the one on the left. They don't have to understand the code; they just have to copy and paste, and they can produce some analytics like the one on the right, which is very similar to getting a Tinken app, which is getting the analytics summarized, pretty general and average things that we're starting to produce. At the moment, we want to get more insights from this data. But the most important thing was that we were able to develop something that the learning designers and educational developers can do on their own, at their own pace, without constant support from the data scientists and experts. Next slide, please. So finally, the insights from the analytics in practice that we got here. In the spirit of that we have in business co-design is we don't want to do the work for them and spend a lot of time doing analytics for them. The staff is developing a lot of analytic skills. They're understanding when is a good idea to produce data and when it's not necessary. The teacher most of the time will request as much as data as possible, and we understand that. It reduced the workload for the learning technology and analytics team. Since we are a small team at the moment with no analytics department, this is a really good strategy that the bigger we get, the more data needs we will need. So the script is a good first step. We can share the data with less vendor restrictions. You may want to do this with a lot of apps, is that the vendor will try to sell maybe higher license with analytics in there. You can work around these things by creating your own tools and analyzing your data. It takes maybe some additional time, but sometimes it is worth to do that. And finally, you make better decisions. Inform stakeholders, in this case, teachers can make better decisions for the next semester now, understanding that maybe quiz 1 didn't do the right thing and most people fail, or maybe they had the specific problem with question number 3. It's really hard to go one by one, but it's really easy to do that with the analytics at the moment. So thank you. That's it. I will see at the questions and try to answer.
Thank you. So what you've seen is a bit of a small little insight into the way we decided to approach what was obviously a very difficult year, and we wanted to try and approach projects in very different ways rather than trying to apply a kind of standard across everybody. We ran somewhere in the vicinity of around 29 different projects this semester, and I wanted to address some of the questions people were asking around how did we actually do this. All the colleagues that presented today are part of a wonderful group of people we have called Business Co-Design. They are our educational development, learning technology, and academic development department inside the business school. They lead a project called Connected Learning at Scale, which was a transformative project to actually redesign our entire curricular approach over the last period of 5 years. They got shoehorned entirely at the start of the year by some very annoying Associate Dean Education, who told them they need to stop everything they're doing and focus on this weird virus coming out into the country in very small numbers as it was at the time. And they all worked with academic staff in different ways. We built a community of resources, of shared practice, of DIY guides, of just straight answers and questions and teaching online support that we used Teams and our LMS. We built a program of training where people could learn how to do things. We ran one only a couple of weeks ago on the use of OBS for better media making, where I think Wing and his colleague Boyd had over 70 people attending that workshop, which for a faculty of 290 odd is pretty good. And then each of the people in this group worked one-on-one with units where they needed them. Andrew, for example, worked with a lot of the light touch units. Jess worked with a lot of the very deep touch units. Wing worked with people on their media, and Carlos, as we see from his presentation, was trying to build some of that technical literacy that's critical. So we really wanted to work directly with our staff as closely as we possibly could to support them to transform what they needed to do with inside their own expectations, their own competencies, but their own levels of ambition. And what we found was, in the main, 90% of staff did not want to just repeat what they were doing. 90% of staff didn't want to go backwards and have a lesser experience for their students. And in fact, the vast majority of our staff found they built better relationships with their students. They built more engaged processes to co-design and co-develop. It's not complete. There is no doubt about that. What we've done is not finished, but it is very much a great base to build on for 2021, which, like most institutions, will still be a hybridized version of an online and face-to-face experience. We still have the borders closed here in Australia. No one can leave the country, no one can enter the country. So our international students are still, at least for the foreseeable future, in their home countries. So they are going to study online, but they don't want to be solely engaging with other students online. They want to see students in the classroom. They want to engage with them. So that's our challenge for 2021. I'm happy to answer any other questions that people would like to tweet at me, or the like. I will drop an email in the chat box. So I really appreciate everyone's time and engagement in the session. I am nothing if not a vociferous advocate of finishing on time. So I will finish on time. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to my colleagues, Wing, Jessica, Andrew, and Carlos for presenting. And you guys can all go to sleep now. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Emma Jane, for getting us all organised and done today.
You are more than welcome. Thank you so much for an absolutely great presentation, and thank you for staying up so late. That is dedication for you. So please say thank you in the chat, or you can do a clap emoji. There we go. Lots of praise coming in there. So thank you ever so much once again. Take care, everybody.